future, talk radio will actually educate, inspire, and make you think. The future is now. Topics and music that affect your life from Universal Broadcasting Network. Tune in at ubnradio.com.
Come on, Corey. My guest with me today, Corey Harrell. He's in the studio.
Whoop, whoop.
We went to Cuba together. Not quite like that. We were with a group of people, and we became friends while we were out there in Cuba. And I said he's also a filmmaker. We'll talk about him in a little bit, but he's in studio today to talk about Cuba. And, of course, my dear, dear friend whose father was from Cuba, and he's a regular now on the show, Dan Lothian, former White House correspondent, among other things. Welcome, Dan.
Thanks for having me. This is always a great time.
You know, there's a couple of hundred people in the studio, once again, clapping you on. But, Dan, thanks for being on. But, you know, my trip to Cuba, as I know yours was, when were you there? I guess in the fall, right?
No, I was there at end of May, first part of June of last year.
Oh, okay. So you were there last year. It was fascinating. Yeah. And I knew that it would be a fascinating trip, but it was even more than I had expected. We went with all my three boys and, of course, John, who is a talk show host on the radio, for those who might not know that. So we took a group of listeners. They were crazy enough to want to travel with us. And I thought to myself, how's this going to work out? A whole busload of people going to Cuba, a bunch of his crazy listeners. And as it turned out, it worked out really, really well. It was a great education for all of us actually being there in Cuba. And I think everybody sort of soaked in that trip in a different way, you know. But you were there, Dan, and having a father who is Jamaican, yet born in Cuba. What was a little bit of your perspective as to how things are changing and how things are going to go in that country?
Yeah, it was fascinating. As you know, I've traveled all around the world, but this is one of those places that was right up there at the top of the list. And I had visions of a place that was basically living in yesterday, and in many ways it was.
Oh,
you know,
for sure.
To be able to see the old cars and the overall mentality there. But I found a real warmth of the people in Cuba. Everyone wanted to have a conversation and talk about what it was like to live in the United States. And for me, as you pointed out, it was a personal journey because my father left Cuba when he was 7 years old. And prior to my trip, I stopped off at my dad's place down in Florida, and we had a conversation about what it was like when he left. And he was describing to me that it was a stormy night and that they were on a boat headed back to Jamaica. And he remembered being afraid, thinking that somehow there was a storm brewing, and he thought that they were never going to make it to Jamaica, and he was sad that he was leaving a place that had been part of his life for about 7 years. And so I've always had this vision of what it would be like to return to Cuba, because my dad always spoke, even though he was raised in Jamaica, he spoke so often about Cuba, and I wanted to go back there. And so it was wonderful. It was almost emotional in a way when I finally landed there and felt like I was going full circle.
You know, and you were there on your own pretty much, right? You didn't. Who did you travel with?
Right. I was on my own. I was, as you know, I have a media company, and one of my clients is PBS. So I was working on a project for PBS, and we were taking a look at religion in Cuba and what has changed and what do people there think will change in the future. But certainly looking back over the last 10 years since Raul Castro has come into power, there have been a lot of changes on some of the issues of human rights and when it comes to religion. And I know it's not a clean bill of health, if you will. There's still a lot of issues that need to be addressed. But we found, whether real or just for PR reasons, because they wanted to make sure that this deal with the U.S. would go through, there were some freedoms that the religious groups had not had in past years, and they were...
Oh, did we lose Dan?
We still have him, but
Dan, for some reason you left the building. If you can hear me, we
Still
can.
here. I can
there
hear
he
you.
goes. Okay, there he goes. What happened to
Yeah,
Dan?
no, I never left the building. I'm still here. I don't know what it was.
You know what? It's the Castro people. That's what's going on here. It's the Castro.
Okay.
All right,
But
so keep going.
I was saying how we had a chance to talk to people who had never spoken on camera before, like the Salvation Army, and they talked about some of the freedoms that they had seen in the last 5 to 10 years that they had not seen prior to that. So it was a wonderful chance to really test the pulse of change in Cuba during this historic time.
Corey, and you can chime in here. One of the guides that we had on our trip, one of them was a very young girl. She's about 23 years old. And to a certain extent, I felt like she was fed, regurgitated, and really believed in a lot of the propaganda that she was telling us, such as, this is terrific how the government gives us our housing. They give us a stipend to live on every month, which most people, of course, we all know now how much that is.
Yeah. About
$20 a month. I was stunned. I thought maybe it would be $200, $500, $1,000. $20 a month. Maybe you're lucky to get $60 or $80 a month if you're a doctor. But she really seemed to believe, even though she's a young girl, that they are still getting all these great benefits like education and housing. And then, of course, they get their food stipend, but that stipend only lasts about 10 days. And I thought to myself, my gosh, this young girl, does she really believe this? Or is she just saying that?
And we got to see their store where they get their food, right? Mm-hmm. It was like everything's rationed off.
Yeah, and after day 10 or 11, they're hustling for tips or whatever they can to make up for the rest of the money so that they can feed their families. I mean, do you really think that they believe in this, or they're just saying it so they don't get themselves in trouble? Dan?
Well, I think some people certainly believe that there is this vision. In fact, there was one young man who was related to someone I was working with while I was down there, and he wanted to come to the United States and had visions of making, sort of maybe not millions of dollars, but certainly becoming quite wealthy. Right. And what this other relative said to him is that, look, when you go to the United States, you have to pay for a place to live. You have to pay for a car. You have to pay to go to school. You have to pay for your health care. And so when you factor that in, you may not do so well there after all. You can't just sit around, as he was describing that he did in Cuba, not do anything and still have a roof over your head. And so there are people there who truly are comfortable with this way of life. Yet they're not getting rich. No one is wealthy there. Maybe a handful of people who are part of the government infrastructure, but no one is wealthy. They're all poor, but they do have some of the basics, and they do play that up quite well. And I heard that a lot. But they still dream of coming to the United States, where they believe it's much easier to get much more money, have many more things for the same amount of work, which is doing nothing.
Go ahead, Harrell.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy because you're talking about the tour guide, and like on our tour bus, it was the exact same thing, and the girl on our tour bus was a bit older, but it did feel like we were being fed a bunch of stuff, and probably by like day 5 or 6. You started questioning everything you were listening to. It felt like that movie, The Truman Show. You know what I mean?
That's exactly
It's like cue the extras. Like there was one moment on our bus where they were talking about fishing, and we were like, oh, they can't fish here, blah 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 blah. And then the next tour that we took, there just happened to be like 5 fishermen. There was like 5 fishermen right there, and they were pretending to be fishing. And so it seemed like the movie, like literally The Truman Show. Like we were just. Everything was just connecting all the dots and I's and all that. It was crazy.
What was interesting to me was I thought, do they really, really believe this? Because they see tourists coming in now. They're seeing Americans. They've been seeing European tourists come for a while now. How could they not just question and say, wow, these people have money to come here. They have money to burn, yet they seem so content and complacent. Is it just because of what they've been fed or because they're afraid? I mean, that's my question.
Yeah, I certainly do think it's a little bit of both. I mean, their vision of what it takes to have money to travel around the world and go places like that, they think you come to the United States and it just happens, right? You can kind of hang out and you can get that kind of wealth and have a wonderful life. So I think they have somewhat of a distorted view of what it takes to make it here in the United States. But certainly, look, they all know they're being watched. When we did interviews with people who were part of religious organizations, and they all talked about having these government minders who came in and sat in the back. You knew exactly who they were. They wanted to get a sense of what was being said at the various churches, because that is where unrest usually sort of festers and then potentially explodes and causes problems for the government. So everyone is quite aware of the ever-watchful government eye, and what comes out of their mouth, I'm sure, is that's factored into it.
Well, we were on a people-to-people tour. There's certain ways that you can get into Cuba, and that's the way that our visas were written up as people-to-people. And I found it interesting that one of the places that we stopped at was an old folks' home, if you will.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, like, they want to show us how they treat their old people. And I just felt like at that point I was being, just like you said, like the Truman Show. And by the way, I thought the same thing while I was there. I don't think we even talked about that to each other. But I felt the same way. Like, okay, are we being watched? Like, cue the old people.
Did you think that we were like, because we were joking on the bus, but I actually kind of believed it, like the bus was bugged?
You said that to me.
Yeah, because you freaked me out.
Okay, Dan, you'll like this story because, again, Dan knows John quite well, my husband.
Yeah.
John's show is bombastic, if you will, and he challenges just about any and everybody. And at the very end of the trip, one of our guides said, would you please stand up and tell us a little bit about your show, because we heard that it's very popular, but we'd like to hear about it. So John stood up and say, well, basically, we get politicians and we throw them in the trash cans. And I thought, oh my God, that's it. We're never going to be able to get out of the country.
And then he said something about Castro too, I think.
Oh my gosh. And I was in the back saying, no, don't. And he just kept going. Once John goes, you can't stop him. And I looked at Corey and I said, that's it. We're never getting out of here. And I think I really freaked you out.
No, listen. Look, she's not giving you the real. Look, she was freaking out. She was freaking out so much that it freaked me out. And then I got to level 10, and by the time I got to level 10, she was like, well, what's wrong with you? Why are you freaking out? You know what I mean? Like, she pulled me into, but that was like the scariest moment. But then we started wondering, like, if our bus was like bugged, and was the driver like working for the government and all that other stuff. But like a perfect example, I felt like we were like the Jim Jones. Remember when the reporters went into Jonestown?
Yep.
You know what I mean? And they saw all the people and all the craziness, but everyone was kind of saying the same thing to make us feel like there was nothing deeper going on.
Yep,
like,
and you knew there was.
Yeah.
And I kept, as a journalist, wanting to, get it out of some of the people about what they're really feeling.
Yeah.
But they're very guarded. They're very guarded to really tell you too much where you can go with it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Dan, did you find that as well?
Yeah, no, that is definitely a fact. When you go as a reporter, you're supposed to check in, and there is supposed to be this government person who shadows you and I guess takes notes on what you're doing. They claim that they don't interfere, but they're supposed to just, for your own safety, they follow you around. I showed up to check in, and the power was out on that particular day. They told me it was going to be out the rest of the day, so they said to come back the Monday, right? Because this was a Friday, and I'm thinking, well, I'm going to be shooting all weekend, so I just never checked back in. So we were roaming around the country without the government official there, and after I came back, I heard from it wasn't the embassy there yet at the time, but the main person here in the United States, who said, hey, they were looking for you to check in. Did you end up going? And I'm like, well, yes, I went. I had sent that person a message and let them know that I was in Cuba, but I said the place was shut down, and they told me to come back. So, by then I was done. So I did not have personally someone watching over me, although perhaps at some point maybe someone found out where I was and followed me from afar, but I did not see anyone or anything that made me suspicious that I was being tracked, because we didn't check in the way we were supposed to.
Okay, but even if they weren't, right? You get so paranoid when you start walking around thinking, oh my gosh, are they following me? Are they listening to me? I got mad at John one morning because he was like rustling his stuff in the suitcase, and I sort of told him a little vocally, and he goes, be careful, we're probably bugged in this room. So in other words, you just feel like no matter where you go, you're being watched, and maybe that's really not the case. I don't know.
I think it was. I don't know. It freaked me out. I'm just like, literally by like the 5th or 6th day was when everything just started being like super weird. Like, I felt weird about leaving my passport in the safe. I just felt weird about that. So I was like, I got to carry it with me because I don't know if they're coming in here.
You know what? I tend to always take my passport with me.
Yeah, right.
I do.
I did. Here's the thing. Yeah. I figured at the time when I was there, the final deal that we have now with the United States and Cuba had not yet been announced.
Right.
So it was a very sensitive time. And even now, the Cuban government, Cuban officials don't want to do anything that will cast sort of a negative shadow over the progress that has been made between Cuba and the United States. And so to the extent that them going after an American or spying on them and that getting out in a big way, that could be pretty embarrassing and could derail some of the progress that we've seen so far. So that's not to say that this stuff isn't taking place, but I think they're a little bit more cautious, and I wasn't fearful at all because I'm figuring, what are they going to do, lock me up? They're not going to lock me up for some reason now because there are more important things that they need to get done, and locking me up is not at the top of the list.
Absolutely not. But it was very interesting how they are such, they're allies, of course, with Russia and with China. And I really felt that, these three are buddies, they're pals. Or they have been at least. And now we're coming in. China certainly doesn't want us to come in, but it's happening. They need us they need us. They need our economy. They need our help. They need us to come in there and spend some money there. But how do you see things going into the future, Dan?
I certainly, you're so right. I mean, China and Russia, but China in particular, has been deep in Cuba for a long time. In fact, I don't know if you remember those giant countdown squares at the stoplights. When you come up to a stoplight, there was a big, square lit up numbers counting down. But under any lighting condition, you could see those were put in by the Chinese. If you see any of those shiny new buses, the only shiny new buses that you saw there came from the Chinese. And
I took notice of that.
Chinese fingerprints all over Cuba, but I certainly think that they are looking. The Cubans are looking to the U.S. because we're just down the street, if you will, from Cuba, and they know that there are billions of dollars on the table right now, potentially for Cuba, when it comes to tourism and everything else that comes from that. So that they want to see that happen. But at the same time, Cuba wants to get some benefits from the medical technology that they have in Cuba. A lot of people don't know this, but they have some of the best doctors in the world, some of the best researchers. And in fact, there's one program now in upstate New York where they brought over some Cuban doctors to work with U.S. doctors. And the sense is that we might have some big medical breakthroughs because some of the knowledge that they've been working on, when you pair it together with some of the things that have been worked on in this country, you might have some breakthroughs. So there's a lot at stake here, not only for the U.S., but certainly for the Cuban government when it comes to sort of new developments that could yield billions of dollars for their economy.
That's a great point. We went to an artist's house. He was a tremendous artist, and he lived in a beautiful home. It was his parents' home. And I wondered, of course, how does he get to live in this house? His dad was a doctor, and I think he had been over in Uganda. Is that the story? For 27 years. The Cuban government has put him up in Uganda for 27 years. He's such a tremendous doctor, and that's where he's been living. So there are all kinds of agreements with the Cuban because their medicine is so advanced and it's so terrific. But he's been out there for 27 years. And I asked this artist, how much does Dad get paid for those services? And he said about $80 a month, Cuban dollars. Imagine that. But I guess the kid, who's I guess in his 30s or 40s, gets to stay in this nice house because of the agreement that's reached. Don't you find that incredible?
That is amazing. I mean, the doctors have been exported, as it was described to me, to other countries, including places like Venezuela, where they exported medical personnel for fuel. And these have been ongoing programs. And in fact, there was a U.S. program that was put in place to allow for some of these medical personnel who are working in some of these other countries and getting paid very little. They'd make $40 a month as a doctor in Venezuela somewhere, and a lot of them, but some of them were sneaking out of there and looking to come to the United States. And so there was a program that was put in place that made it very easy for them to come into this country if they found themselves in a situation like that. So there's not a lot of money that they make. There's so many of them. There's like 50,000 medical, both doctors and other level of medical experts in Cuba. And it's more than that island needs, and so they export them to other countries in exchange for dollars.
Well, it's interesting. We accept Cubans who come over here unequivocally. Isn't that correct?
We do. I mean, if you come through the right channels, and certainly if you don't even come through the right channels, we just don't automatically send you back. There is a process once you get to our shores. But I think now, I mean, I spoke to a lot of people who certainly have it on their list. They want to come here, not necessarily to come here and stay here, but they want to come here to experience what it's like. It is sort of like, for us, Cuba has been this forbidden place. So has the U.S. And they know a little bit about what goes on here, but they don't even have the access to the internet or to cable television. I don't know what it was like in the place that you guys stayed, but I had 3 channels, and only one of them came in, clearly. The rest of them took me back to the 80s when you would get mostly snow and the frame would move all over the place. So they don't have a full picture of all of the stuff that maybe other countries people look at and dream about the United States, but they hear the stories and they know that people have been giving their lives to cross the few miles to get to the United States, and they're enticed by that. Not necessarily to come here and stay, but certainly visit.
We were at one beach resort. The first place that we went to was a beautiful beach resort that Cubans are not allowed, only certain tourists with permission, of course, and government officials. And the Cuban people who did work there, they stayed there. And on the channels, we had a lot of Chinese programming, of course.
HBO was on there too, though.
HBO was on there?
Oh, you had HBO?
Yeah, let me tell you. No,
whoa. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, hold on.
Wait a minute.
We set that up just for you guys.
Wait, hold on. I got to tell you this.
I think you're right. Dan's right. That week it was there. The next week it was probably gone.
Hey, let me tell you this.
And probably only in your room and my room.
Yeah, the best show ever that I was not expecting to be on a Cuban station was freaking Love and Hip Hop in Atlanta.
What?
Like, that show was on. Like, I get it, and I'm looking
Why
at the
didn't you
channels,
call me?
and I'm like, they got Love and Hip Hop. And maybe because they knew 3 black people were coming.
That's it.
So,
There
like,
were
we got to get
3.
some programming for the brothers so they can go back to Cuba and talk about. But Love
There
and
you
Hip
go.
Hop was on.
No, you're right.
that.
You're
It
right.
was
in freaking Cuba, man.
They knew you were coming, and they
took-
were tracking you. They had programming just for you.
And I watched the show, so they did some background on me.
You know
so
what?
they knew.
They took a look at your passport. Well, it was your passport.
Everything I said earlier, they were spying on you. They knew you were
They
coming.
knew
Corey,
Love and Hip Hop,
they
man.
knew you were. I
How
love
ghetto
that.
is that? Really? Is that what they think of me? Love and Hip Hop. Can I get a?
Yes, I didn't have that in my room. I would have loved to watch that. No, but okay. So I saw a lot of China. Okay, there was a lot of Chinese shows in my room. I couldn't really get much of anything but Chinese.
Really?
And the internet. You brought up the internet. It was making me nuts because I had to. Okay, the first day we were in Cuba was the day that Jordan, my middle kid, was finding out about the colleges. So we were like, okay, we got to find a way to get out. And the only way that you find out nowadays is via your email. You can't call somebody. That's it. So we landed. We're at this resort that nobody gets to go to. And I'm like, hey, I need the internet. Okay, here I am, this American lady out of Los Angeles. And she's like, well, we don't have it. It's not working. Try back in the morning at 5 a.m. I'm like, what do you mean it's not working? She said, sometimes it'll work at 5 a.m. You have to buy an internet card and sit in the lobby. So wouldn't you know it, at 5 a.m, I'm getting myself dressed in the pitch black and I'm going into the lobby. Me and about like 50 other people were buying our little cards.
Yeah,
and
for
we're
like
trying
$1, right? It was like $1.
I don't know, $2 for like an hour, $5. It was certainly worth it. To them, that's what, 10% of their monthly salary. To me, it was, nothing, pennies. So, but I never could get out. We couldn't find out what colleges Jordan got into for a couple of days. And
Did it work when you guys went?
only sometimes the internet, and then when you were in the cities, you had to go maybe into a park, right? Into the town central and buy a card and see if you could get out. But even then,
You're with Verizon, right?
I was with Verizon.
See, the thing is, only Verizon phones would work because I had AT&T, so we were completely blacked out of everything.
Blacked out, huh?
Yeah, like nothing.
Yeah. I have
your
See,
phone
blacked
worked
out.
over there?
Huh? Mine didn't.
Your phone worked?
My Verizon didn't work. I may be the only Verizon person. I couldn't get out, and it was it made me feel very uncomfortable not being able to access.
Most U.S. phones did not, unless things have changed recently.
It didn't
absolutely no U.S. phone would work over there, and no credit cards. And that's kind of, so I borrowed a phone. I actually rented a phone from someone locally so that I could make calls internally and externally. But nothing I had would work. And I didn't have internet at all at the place I was staying. And you had to go to this hotel and line up and hang out in the lobby. And the signal was so weak that it wasn't even worth it.
Yeah, so we had to. Everyone was panicking because it's like literally we had to live without a phone, and I mean, it was crazy.
It
But
was
mine wouldn't work. Period, though, no matter what card I had.
okay. And as I was walking toward the lobby from my little villa where I was staying, I actually thought it was very nice. I didn't know what to expect from the Cuban hotels, and where we stayed was actually quite nice. So anyway, at 5 a.m. here I am trudging over to the lobby in the dark. And what happens? They spray every morning for mosquitoes.
Oh, that smoke.
And it was like I was fogged in. I mean, I was walking through the fog, and I felt like I was just choking. I was going to die. And it really took me back, like I felt like, I don't know, 70s, 60s, 50s, 40s. Between that and the cars. Kurt, do we have a shot up of some of the cars? I took this really cool picture. There it is. No, not me. The pictures of the cars. There you go. I just took a bunch of pictures of cars and then I put them together. These cars that they have been living with in Cuba, the American cars, since the 1950s, how resourceful these people are to fix them.
Frankenstein it together is crazy.
And Frankenstein it together. Yeah. Dan, that may have been the most incredible thing for me to see these cars. Your thoughts?
I was just so in love with those cars. And what's interesting, I had some conversations with folks there, and they said, a guy was showing me an engine, and he said, very few of the parts in this engine right here even belong to this car.
Oh, sure.
Some of them, they come from whatever car that they can find, and then they fabricate a lot of the parts. In fact, there's a guy there. There's this cool there's this show now on, I think it's still on the air, on one of the cable networks, that features these cars and a couple of different mechanics who keep these cars on the road. Really fascinating how they use things like cardboard to make gaskets and other things just to keep these things on the road. And then, of course, as you probably know, you have the older ones that very little body work has been done, and those are used as the cabs for some of the, for the locals. And then the prettier ones, the ones that have been sort of upgraded and painted over, are typically for the tourists. So you have sort of this two-class system as to who gets to use those cars.
Well, one day, I defected with some of the girls to go shopping, and we got into this taxi, a beautiful taxi, and it was hot, and I needed to turn the window down, and I couldn't figure out how to put down the window. And he handed me the little handle, and he goes, "Here, put it on." I said, "What?" He said, "Well, I don't want to lose it. So whenever someone goes to put the window down, I give them the handle, but as soon as you put your window down, give it to me back," because he didn't want to lose his handle, stuff like that.
Did you smell the exhaust when you were in the car?
What? Of course I did.
Yeah, it was the worst. That's the part that...
Okay, between being, gassed from the mosquito pesticide stuff and the exhaust from those old cars.
It was horrible.
It was something else. It was something else. But so much about that history, from the way these people live, how... I don't know how they're going to take in more Americans coming in there. And now cruise ships are coming in.
Yeah.
I mean, boatloads of Americans coming in to spend their dollars on souvenirs. I don't know.
But yeah, it was one thing I want to ask you about the education there, though, Dan. That they were telling us that basically everybody, because education is free out there, of course. So like the majority of everybody, they have PhDs, they have masters. Everyone working at the hotel, the maid, you know what I mean? She has a PhD, and so I want to know like how real is that? Is that like, I mean, is everyone that educated there, or was that just something they were kind of like telling us?
Yeah, I don't know that everybody has a PhD. I mean, there are a lot of people who are very, very highly educated there, and the education system is fairly good, from what I understand. I think it's more of, everyone, education, if you do want to get an education,
it's available.
It's available to you. And it's not something that you have to pay out of your own pocket. And so it is true that people not only go to school. My sound guy actually went to school in Russia, and that was paid for by the government. It was part of some program that he was in, and he did his college in Russia. So it is available to everyone, and it is true. The level, not everyone though. I mean, we were interviewing some folks who are part of the Santeria religion, which is sort of African based, and some of those folks who we spoke to, a lot of them had not finished their sort of whatever middle school, elementary school. That was about as far as they went. So, I don't think you can go out and say that every single person on the street has, a college degree or graduate degree. But it is something that if you want to do, you can do it, and it doesn't cost you anything.
Interesting. Now, I know you want to try, Dan, and get your dad back there, right? I know he's older. And
Yeah, I'd love to. I'd love to. He's now just turned 88 years old, and I'd love to be able to take him back where he grew up, where he was born and where he grew up. It's a little ways outside. That's the other thing that was surprising. I mean, I thought it's a small island. You can get around pretty easily. But we went out to the most western part of the island. It took us 4 hours to drive out there. It was an 8-hour round trip. And so the area where my dad was born is in the same region where Castro actually was born and raised.
What area was that?
So
what area?
it's called El Este, I believe it is. I can't remember the entire name. El Oriental, I believe, is the overall sort of the county or the region where he was born. But it's a few hours outside of Havana. And I'd love to take him back there and have him experience that since he hasn't been there since he was 7.
Wonderful trip.
Do you think that people who leave Cuba, they want to come back?
I do, don't you?
You think so?
I want to come back. I want to come back.
No,
No, I'm talking about people who live there.
Oh, you don't mean
Not
tourists.
Americans. Yeah, of course. It was cool for us. But I'm talking
You're
about
talking
people.
about Cubans, right?
You Cubans, if you leave, do you want to come back? Like, do you think that?
No, not everybody. Not everybody. I mean, I think you have 2 camps, right? You have those who left and are angry about what happened to their parents. If they were young at the time, they are very upset about what's going on now with the relationship between the U.S. and Cuba, and refuse to go back until the Castro regime is gone. And they're very adamant. I mean, they're very strong feelings, especially down in South Florida. So you have those who do not want to see this relationship happen until Castro's out of there. But then there are others, there are others who have been longing to go back. They've been able to, some of them have traveled and gone back. There were programs where you could go back, and even, years ago under Obama, you could, start sending money to family members and other relatives there. So some have already been going back. But it's not monolithic in the thinking that everyone who left Cuba wants to go back.
We only have a minute or two because I have another guest who's coming on, unrelated topic actually, but also my tour guide, we mentioned she's 23 years old. Her sister's 22, and she flew to be on vacation somewhere, and then flew into Mexico, and then walked across the border to come to the U.S. That's how she got into the U.S. And she's now in Miami because she really wanted to come to America. And she's so confused. She does not know how to use a credit card. Credit cards still confound her. She doesn't understand how a piece of plastic can be used to pay for things. And then how do you write that check at the end of the month to pay off that piece of plastic? She's very, very confused about it still, even though she's been in Miami for a few months. So that just goes to show that for all the years that people are there, I think too much of our culture too quickly is really going to confuse them. Don't you think? I really feel that way.
Well, it certainly will confuse some people. And for me, I was confused because I had to use cash the whole time I was down there. I didn't know how to do that.
I know. We brought so much. I know.
I've got a pocket full of cash and I've got to pay for stuff. I don't pay for things with cash.
Man, we got robbed in Cuba. That's for our cash. One of the guys that we were with, Jim Adams, who was part of our camp at the hotel, he set this thing down for literally probably like 1 minute, and it was his money he just got. It was $300, and within that 1 minute time, it was taken. It was a second hotel. So then we got the security. Wow. We got the security. They looked at the tape. They wouldn't let us look at the tape. Yeah. The people who we suspected stole it, the security went and talked to them without us even saying who we thought it was, but they didn't do anything about it.
You never saw.
And they wanted our passports.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, were they American people? Were they tourists?
No, people who worked there.
People who worked there. Yeah, that's why I didn't want to leave my passport or anything in the safe, because I don't know what could happen when I'm not there.
Yeah, and what's great about that is black on black crime exists even in Cuba. Because when we were at the resort, white people didn't mess with us. We get to the other hotel, it's all black people, and we got robbed. I don't like that, Dan. I don't like that, Dan.
Oh, my God. All right, we're going to end on that one. All right, Dan Lothian, thanks a lot for being on. And always, your insights are just amazing. I mean, not just as someone who traveled to Cuba, but just as a journalist and someone has great perspective. So thanks a lot for coming on.
I love you, Dan.
Well, thank you. I love you, too. Thank you very much. This is wonderful.
All right, thanks, Dan. Talk to you later. Isn't he wonderful? No, we're not done yet. Put your headphones on. I just have another guest who's coming on, and she's been kind enough to wait on the phone. And we generally have 2 topics that we like to tackle every show. And we've got Ann Kearney. Is that how you say your middle name?
Kearney.
Kearney, Cooke. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for being a patient person and for waiting for us to talk about our travels to Cuba. Have you been to Cuba, by the way, or do you have any interest in going there to travel to Cuba?
Well, I was just listening, and I've never been there, but I'm getting more interested after hearing the 3 of you talk about it.
And it's been a doctor, actually, I should say. It's been it was a tremendous trip for all of us. Not quite what I expected. I wasn't sure of some of the propaganda, and I'll call it that they were telling us, whether it's about the cars or the governments or the amount of money that people are given each month to live on. I wasn't sure if that was true. And it was, and the people, how they seem to have bought into it. And it was really quite an education. It's really stayed with me. How about you, Corey?
Yeah, it was really a life-changing experience, but just being there, like, I had that same confusion just of not knowing what was true and what was not true. That's why I even had to ask Dan, like, about the education thing, because they made it sound so amazing. Mm-hmm. Like, everything about Cuba was amazing. Mm-hmm. You know, like, we would be on the tour bus, and Cuba was great at this and this and that, and then suddenly it got to the point where you're just kind of wondering what's really real and what's not real.
Like you said, just like a little bit like you were on the Truman Show.
Yeah, like cue the extras, cue the actors, get them all in place, and then they're going to talk about everything that we pass.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so you are on because we were doing a little reading up about you, and you are a best-selling author. And tell us a little bit about yourself and about how you deal with women and eating issues and eating disorders.
Well, I'm a psychologist, and I'm also a mother of 4 adult kids now.
Ooh. That's a lot. I've got 3, and I could barely make it, although they're not really adults yet. 2 of them are, but congratulations for that.
Well, thank you. It's the biggest challenge, but the most rewarding thing I think anyone can do. But, I've been specializing in the treatment of body image, eating disorders, teaching wellness classes, and have studied beauty. The power of suggestion with beauty, all different aspects for my whole career, which is about 35 years.
Mm-hmm. And I really, you know about this body challenge, right? That's been going out there on the internet tell me a little bit about that, about there are girls comparing their waist size to a piece of paper, right? An 8.5 by 10 or 11 piece of paper. There's a picture right there.
Yes. I mean, this is another bizarre body challenge. And, there was the thigh gap, and now there's the A4 waist challenge. And basically what it is that young women compare the size of their waist to the width of a standard A4 sheet of paper. Mm-hmm. And they win if the paper entirely obscures their waist.
Their waist, not their hips, but their waist.
Their waist.
So then from the front... So then from the front, that waist cannot be wider than 8.5 inches, correct?
Right. And the thing is that it's,
wow.
Not many people can meet this challenge. I mean, it's virtually impossible for most people because of the hormones that females have and the natural shape of the female body. And so what's problematic about this is that girls often with these bizarre challenges will compare themselves and feel like they don't measure up.
Well, I just tried it right now as we were talking and as I was looking at the pictures. And I've had 3 kids too, so I definitely couldn't measure up. But I don't think I could have measured up when I was 12. I mean, you're right. That's really tough. But why are people buying into it? Here's my question. Why are young girls buying into it? It doesn't necessarily make you prettier or sexier or more appealing. I don't think, anyway. I mean, we've got a couple guys here in the studio. What do you think?
I don't agree with that at all. Especially, having a goddaughter. Like, I would hate for her to have to hold up to that standard. She'd probably be sad and miserable all the time. And I just think there's so much from the internet to what's on movies and TV that now it's almost hard to combat that image when that's the only image you're actually being seen, that's being shown or portrayed. So that's really disturbing actually to look at and think that people are actually trying to do that. And then it's also what extent are people actually going to, what lengths are they taking to actually get that thin? You know what I mean? Like, if you don't meet the challenge, what are you doing later to try to meet it? That's the stuff that's really kind of disheartening.
I guess, what are they doing? Starving? Are they?
Well, that's an excellent point, because when they don't meet it, often they feel a lot of body shame, and they engage in really self-destructive behaviors like starving, throwing up, just a lot of behaviors to try to reach an impossible ideal. And this should be the time in their life when they're really figuring out, who am I? What do I believe in? What are my signature strengths? What do I want to do in life? What kind of impact do I want? What kind of wife or mother or professional? And see, this keeps young women busy with something they can't attain and leaves them feeling very bad about themselves.
You know what? I like to look back at things historically. I mean, since the beginning of time, women have been trying to make themselves more appealing. And, you even look back at the Victorian times, the corsets and, just sort of the very, very low cut dresses. I mean, it just seems to also be a little natural, long before social media, that women want to be attractive to the opposite sex, or I guess to other women. So it's not a modern phenomenon that this is happening. It's really almost been going on, don't you think?
Well, again, it's a sign of mental health when you want to take care of your body and look your best. So there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
I think what's changed throughout the ages is that the standards of beauty are ones that very few women can meet. And there's also been this message that if you can't meet them, you're lazy, there's something wrong with you. And so I think that, the thigh gap, the A4 waist challenge, most women are not going to be able to do that. So, yeah, there has been these kind of beauty ideals throughout time, but I think in the last 30 years, the ideals have been impossible for women to become. And so you have very thin women with very big breasts now, which is, plastic surgery.
Right. When you can just go and buy it, I suppose, these people, so a lot of people are going to buy it, or they're starving themselves. But how do you try and teach them from the inside out to try and hopefully concentrate first on what's going on inside of them before they start changing the outside? Because that's tough. They want to want to look attractive is what it comes down to.
Absolutely. The thing is that they need to know is that getting like all this fashion surfing on the internet and all this focus on your appearance, the more you do that, the less self-esteem and the poor body image you have. There's research to back that. But when you're doing things like, I did a study years ago, and we looked at who are the girls that are really self-confident. And we found that they had three capacities. One is that they had a healthy body image. The second is they knew how to handle relationships, were able to get close to people. The third was that they had healthy ways to handle stress. And the last one was that they were able to set goals and meet them. And so these are the kind of things that really make somebody feel confident. I think they've been taught, I have to look a certain way, and they look outside of themselves at celebrities and the internet and these beauty challenges. And again, it's time to look in and say, wait a minute, I'm going to feel good about myself if I'm a really good listener when I visit my grandmother. I'm going to feel good about myself when I finish this presentation I've had to prepare for. And the better I feel about myself, the better I'll take care of my body, and the more attractive I'll be.
You made a great point, because the better you feel about yourself on the inside, mentally, will help you to take care of your body. Because I actually was so big after my third kid was born, and I just kind of let it go because I wasn't working, and I was like, I'm not going to worry about it. And I didn't even think about it. But it was actually really unhealthy. So then one day when I decided, I want to just get back into work, and I'm just going to start walking and eating a little better, that's how I became more healthy. Because it wasn't healthy to be that heavy. But you made a really good point, and I'm not heavy anymore. It was just that one time in life when that kind of happened. But it's important to be fit and to look your best, just not like the people that you see in the magazines, because they've got to know that that's not real. I mean, they have to be able to know that.
No, it's not real.
And you know what?
I've been on a number of TV shows.
Right.
And, before you go in the green room, they take you to makeup, they fix you up. Some people come out, they look almost totally different than when they walked in. And I remember one time I was on the Oprah show, and my youngest was about 3, and my husband and the kids were pointing, saying, "That's Mom." And he went, that ain't mom. That ain't mom, like a little kid would. Because he's seeing me in, sweatpants and all this and not my hair fixed up in my eyes. So, yeah, we can't compare ourselves because a lot of the pictures you see they're photoshopped. I just say, figure out what are your signature strengths. You might have great legs. You might be a really good athlete. You might be an amazing singer. You might be a really compassionate person. And develop those, because that's when there's only one of you. And you have a certain shape and a certain look to you. Take care of yourself and strut yourself out there, because that's when you're attractive.
It's complicated, again, as you know. I also think a lot of girls, don't have the best body image if maybe they weren't told as kids by mom or dad or big sister or brother that they are beautiful. I think that's important too. It's every girl in any way is beautiful, and if they're not told, I think they're always looking outside to find beauty, and that's so difficult because I've seen it myself. I've worked with young girls and helped them, and I think that's one of the toughest.
And speaking of that, one component I think that a lot of people don't really look at is like young men. I think a lot of young men help project a lot of these negative stereotypes to girls. Like, when I see this challenge with the paper, I'm thinking, okay, how many young boys are like showing their girls, see, look at this, look at that. And a lot of times guys, they feed into all this stuff, and all it does is put unnecessary pressure on the girls. So now it's become more real to them because the guy's like, yo, so-and-so over here, she got the paper challenge. What's up with you? And I think a lot of, like, even with men.
That's a great point.
Yeah, men can probably come in. It's not just a female thing. I think men can come in and teach our young men how to be men and how to respect women and say, hey, you don't have to look like this for me to love you. And I think a lot of times young men feed into that. So I think that's the component that maybe people should look at it as well. Not saying a guy has to validate a woman, but to have that support system saying, I don't care about no freaking paper challenge. You know what I mean? That just, it's just that extra nice energy. So I think that's something people probably need to look at as well.
I think that's a great idea. Wonderful. And, I lead workshops on body image and helping your daughter develop positive body image and things like that across the country. And I often say to people, I said, have you ever been attracted to somebody who's not a perfect 10? Well, everyone's hands go up. And I'll say, well, how can you be attracted to them? And they'll say, oh, they have this great sense of humor, or their receding hairline is just cute. They have beautiful eyes, or whatever it is. And I say, well, again, then why do you feel like you have to be a perfect 10 for people to be attracted to you, for people to want to be around you? Because there's very few perfect 10s. And so it's like for us to say, well, I can't go to that dance, or I can't apply for that job, or I can't go to the pool until I have a perfect body. You're just procrastinating on your life.
I also think,
nobody is a perfect 10.
I also think it's important as women that we're really supportive of each other. Girls for girls, women for women. I think we can be our own best friends. I mean, it's great to have a man validate us, right, and be so supportive. But as women, sometimes we're doing it more for each other. So if we could, be there more for each other and just say, you look amazing. And what happens a lot of times when we say to each other, you look amazing, at least me, I'm like, no, I don't. And we just have to take that in and say, thank you. And believe it and learn to believe that. Yeah.
Yeah, not everybody could be Deborah.
Take it as a gift. Somebody's giving you a gift when they say you look amazing. If someone gave you a present, you wouldn't say, oh, no, not really. You would take it and say thank you. And we have to allow ourselves to take that in, because the way you talk to yourself very much influences the way you think about your body and the way you behave with your body.
Now, you do
counseling. It's very important to say thank you.
You do counseling all over. How can people get in touch with you if they want?
Well, if you go to my website, it's DRANNEYCOOKE.com. And I do coach people across the country on these kind of issues. I also speak at, all different wellness events, women's conferences, all different schools and things on this whole issue.
And do you do internet coaching as well? Like people can call you and they
Yes,
can, okay,
I do internet coaching.
I think
too.
it's very
If
valuable.
you go to my website, you'll see that.
Okay, I think it's very valuable for people to know. People who are listening, if they like what you had to say, if they can call you up and see if they can get some counsel with you, that's great. Now, you're going to be coming out to Los Angeles at any time?
Well, I have a sister that's out in Huntington Beach with her husband and 3 amazing kids, so I do get out there sometimes.
I would love to have you.
Go ahead.
I
have to brag a little bit about her her daughter, Kelly, just got an award for Girl Scouts. She's a 12-year-old. And again, when you look on the picture, I couldn't be there. She got an award as a Girl Scout, selling a lot of cookies. She's amazing. And what was really awesome is when you look at her picture after the award, I mean, she's beaming. That's what self-esteem is.
That's what self-esteem is
It's
right.
not,
And something she
like
did.
she accomplished something. She worked together with people for an important cause, and she looked beautiful. She was beaming, and it's like we have to move girls from, all my self-esteem is how do I look compared to the girl in 17 magazine?
Mm-hmm.
No, it's coming from inside. What are the choices I make each day?
Doctor, thank you so much for being here. Cooke, Dr. Ann, tell me your middle name again. I'm just terrible when it comes to middle names.
It's Kearney.
Kearney.
It's Dr. Ann.
I want to say Kearney,
Cooke.
and it's like, okay,
and
very good.
check out my website. I am, like I said, I'm available to give talks and also to do coaching.
Okay, and when you come back out here, when you do come out here to visit family and to give a talk, I'd like you to come in studio. That'd be really great to have you in here. How's that?
Thank you so much. I will definitely do that.
All right. Thanks so much for being on. She's terrific.
You're welcome.
I really do believe in this. I struggle with it myself. I struggle with it to this day. I struggled with it as a kid. I don't think it'll ever really go away when you feel, maybe you don't look as good as you should. But I always try and say, look the best you can for you. Like if you're 5 feet, work it. If you're 5'9", work it. Just figure. But to be fit, at least to be healthy. Try to be healthy. And I eat terribly. Like just before I came here, I had a cookie and I had some Easter candy. So like if I could just get that under control, that would be a lot better. But
I say we get rid of all 17 magazines and replace it with mugshots from female prisons. Because every girl looks better than women in prison.
I couldn't agree
Let that
more.
be the standard.
With their beards growing and they're getting all chubby from eating too much rice
and real gangster
and fatty foods.
That's what we should do. I solved it. We're done. I solved it.
The girls of Rikers Island.
Yeah, that would be. I solved the problem just now. I think I solved it.
There you go. Now, real quick. You are going to Cannes
yes.
in a couple weeks. Tell me real
I don't know
quick.
how that happened, but yeah, I did a short film with Royce Multimedia. Shout out to Ed Royce and Jim Adams. And it's called From Where the Opera Sings. And we will be going to Cannes in France. We'll be out there 15th to the 22nd.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
And you're going to be showing it there.
Yeah, they're going to have a whole private screening room and everything. So it's going to be super, super dope. So this is my first time.
That is amazing. And I'm going to be starring in your next one, right? I mean,
yeah, definitely.
There's like no doubt about that. I mean, whatever it is, you come to me with a good
Yeah,
script.
you just got to be able to fit the paper challenge. You'll be okay. You could be in the... No,
I could be in... You know what we're going to do? We're going to end with a little bit of your film.
Okay,
Good?
cool. Yeah, this is the trailer.
All right, everybody. Thank you for being here for another edition of What's Up with Kobylt and Friends. We had a lot of friends on today, and we're going to end now with From Where the Opera Sings.
Awesome.
See you all next week.
Almost like a mushroom cloud.
لدقائق من افتتاح
There's that haze everywhere.
Are we on?
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if we were coming back to us or not. I thought that's true. I cannot wait to. I watched the whole thing in its entirety, and I was riveted. I have to say. So how can people find it on if they go on the internet?
Just go to I guess we're gonna do it. Encore. No, you got
What
something.
happened?
No,
How can
it's
people find you?
Facebook.com
Yeah.
/ From Where the Opera Sings.
From Where the Opera Sings. I
Yes.
was riveted. I mean,
Like our page.
There was so much about this that I just fell in love with. I watched it a couple times too.
I appreciate that.
So,
That's pretty awesome.
and you were like, watch it. I loved it. I loved it. I'm going to pass it around. Okay,
and I love
everybody.
being here. Thank you so much
Wasn't
for
this
inviting
fun?
me. It
I'm
was
so
awesome.
glad we became friends
I
on
know.
that trip.
I know the real Deborah. This is a whole different Deborah from the one I know.
What,
in
the
Cuba.
wild, crazy
Yeah,
Deborah?
that's a whole different.
I was
That's a
pretty-
whole nother show.
Okay, but I was, go ahead. Give me like 10 seconds. What's the wild, crazy Deborah? Please. go
Deborah
there.
is so out of control that her own kids are trying to bring her down. Like, Mom. Like, you don't know how many times I would hear, Mom.
What did I do?
You'd be out there acting crazy, saying things completely politically incorrect. Just
I wouldn't dare. Maybe we should have a show on what Deborah does.
loving every Cuban guy that's staring at her.
Oh, they're
I
okay.
caught the looks. I caught them.
Look
I
at-
saw.
Look at you, Craig.
I
Craig's
saw
like,
them. I know the real Deborah.
Wait, put that mic up, Craig.
What?
It's Kurt, by the way.
Wait, see, I did it to him too. Wait, do I do that every week too? That's a whole
it's
other.
Kurt.
No. I do it every week. All the wrong names. Okay, Karen, I'll call you. Go ahead.
No, it just, I mean, I love that about you though. So you're
A
just out
complete
there.
nut.
Yeah, you're just out there, and it's fun. It makes it very interesting, a lot of fun.
Could you imagine living with me though? Well, you were with me,
Yes.
3 kids and my husband, and I apologized at the very beginning. I said, "Hey, you people signed up for this trip to go with John. Little did you know you're getting me and 3 teenage boys. You hear me yelling from the back of the bus. Too bad. Just deal with it. Isn't it true? I stood up and I told people they got to deal with it.
She was all over the place trying to go out every night. It was just.
And
a
I'm the
mess.
crazy one. I took 2 of my older ones. Oh my gosh, to go out dancing. Remember that night to go to some nightclubs that we went to?
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh, we've got 2. I don't know. We're way over time, but I don't think there's a show behind me. What the heck? We'll just keep going. We have nothing better to do. So remember that night? Okay, let's go crazy Deborah here, shall we? We had 2 taxis. My taxi, I had to sit on people's laps because there were too many people in it.
She liked that though. Just so you know, she liked that. She liked that.
Oh, look at you. We had so much fun. And then, like, club number 1 just wasn't happening. Club number 2 was a little boring. My kid was getting mad at me, because he wanted to.
But that's normal. Everyone was always getting mad at her. Her family was always throwing looking. There's always a thing happening.
Kind of in a
Like, they
loving-
need to be a reality show, I swear. Like, I would watch that. Right after Love and Hip Hop, it needs to be your family.
But in a loving way, right?
Yeah, and the kids are so different, though. They're, like, opposite of her because they're, like, so super quiet.
They're mellow. They really.
Yeah,
but
and then
this
your
is
husband,
what-
like, he's super quiet. Like, I had never heard the show before, so I didn't know who that was.
I had to stand up and say to people, okay, I'm sorry he's so quiet. I know you all signed up for the crazy guy on the radio, and he was so quiet.
Yeah.
And people were coming to me saying, is he going to talk? So I finally stood up and said, look, here's what you're going to get all week. You're going to get me. I'm the one who'll talk. The kids are a little quiet unless we're all, like, arguing. And then there's John, who won't say much at all. So I ended up kind of getting to know everybody on the trip. I had such a good time.
Yeah, we had 2 buses, and she was going back and forth to the buses, and then she ended up on our bus because our bus was like the bus that was legit.
It was so
our bus
much
was like
fun.
the bus.
And then we would hang out late
Yeah.
at night while everybody was sleeping. We'd be down at the hotel bar just kind of hanging out and talking. And I'm not much of a drinker. I'd have like a cup of espresso, or it was a great trip.
Yeah, it was like super awesome. Other than getting robbed at the hotel, it was like really, really good.
I really had a great
And
time.
it's funny because even when you talked about everything being so like weird as far as the environment of people, one girl actually pulled me aside. I don't think I told you that. She pulled me aside at the club and she was like, it's all a lie. Like, it was like that scene in the movie.
She was
where,
a Cuban girl who did
Yeah,
that?
she was like, it's all a lie. Like, it was like that scene in the movie where
And
suddenly,
she looked at you like, I'm a plant too. It's like it's all a lie.
or maybe
I mean,
she was, you think she was like a plant too?
Who knows?
But
Maybe
she
she's
looked
just-
at me like, for real. She's like, I was
She
like,
wanted you to take her home with her. That's what.
Yeah,
she
I asked one girl to marry me. Like, I really meant it. I'm sorry to my
The
girlfriend, Jen.
people
I'm sorry,
there,
but
the people there are gorgeous. The men, the women, just everyone there. I
this
thought.
girl was so amazing that I was ready to like stop everything and just completely. I was ready to marry her.
See,
I was ready to let it all go, Alex, my friend.
I'm
I was
well-
ready to do it. And she had a plan too. I said, hey, let's just get, I was playing around. I'm like, hey, let's get married. She was like, okay, well, if we're married for 3 months and then I got a brother in Miami and you can come back and after 3 months we can get back to the States. She had a whole plan.
I realized I'm married and I was there with John and the 3 boys, but I just couldn't believe how adorable those men were too. It's like, whew, just a pile.
Yeah, I know. I caught you looking. There was one moment I caught her candid moment. She didn't even see. We were at that last restaurant. She's sitting on a bench. There's this Cuban guy on the top of the roof. And I'm looking at this guy. I'm like, who is he staring at? And
On
I
the
look,
top of the roof?
Yeah, that one place where the loft
People
thing.
were looking at me. From
No,
the
no,
roof.
let me tell you. No, he was looking down. I caught her and she was looking up at him doing that little like with the mouth and all that stuff, and they got like a moment. Like it was a real moment.
I was born like this, okay? I was a little 2-year-old just flirting away, but it's
she was
very
born at
innocent. It was very innocent.
She was born at 10. Yes.
Oh.
She was born at 10.
We'll talk about this later. Anyway, we're going to
I
have
think
to
I'm in
sign
love with
off
her
for
right
sure.
now. At this moment, I think, ladies and gentlemen, I think I might have fallen in love right now. I think I might be in love.
My God, your friend is here.
Is John okay with that?
Everyone's okay. Everyone knows
Okay,
this is
all right.
just
So
the way
I think I might
roll.
be in love.
Innocently. Anyway, I love you. Thank you for being
All right, no
here.
problem.
We're going to hang out later. Again, thanks for being here for another edition of What's Up with Kobylt and Friends. See you next week. Maybe I'll bring out the real Deborah for real. What do you think?
I got footage. I got footage.
Bye, everybody.